The first thing my aunt did after my mother died was take my phone out of my hand. Not gently, not asking. She just slid it away as if I were a child who might break something important. "Let the adults handle this," she said, already dialing someone else. I remember standing there in the hospital hallway, my fingers still curved like they were holding something that was no longer there. The smell of antiseptic burned my nose. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out and forgotten to put it back. My mother was still warm in the room behind me, and my aunt was already planning her goodbye. "I'm her daughter," I said, my voice barely working. "I should call the funeral home." My aunt, Linda, didn't even look at me. "You're in shock. This is too much for you right now." Too much. Those words followed me like a shadow. She told the nurse she was my mother's sister and spoke with the calm authority of someone who had been waiting for this moment. She asked about paperwork, about release forms, about timelines. Not once did she ask me how I was holding up. Not once did she say my mother's name. When we finally left the hospital, Linda drove. I sat in the passenger seat staring at my hands, still expecting to feel my mother's fingers there like they always were when I got scared. Linda talked the entire drive about costs, about traditions, about what my mother would have wanted. I watched the road blur and wondered when my own grief had become an inconvenience. By the time we reached my house, Linda had already called half the family. She announced arrangements before anyone had time to ask questions. "We'll do a traditional service," she said briskly, setting her purse on my kitchen table like she owned the place. "Closed casket, church service, burial next to your grandparents." I blinked. My mom wanted cremation. Linda waved a hand. "She said that once. People say lots of things. This is better, more respectful." Respectful. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. My throat felt raw. My head throbbed. Everything inside me was screaming, but nothing came out right. That night, I slept on the couch with the lights on. I couldn't go into my mother's room. I couldn't touch her things. Every sound in the house felt wrong without her. The next morning, Linda arrived early, coffee in hand, energy fully restored. "We need to move quickly," she said. "Funeral homes fill up fast." She spread brochures across my table like menus. I stared at them without seeing anything. "She wanted music," I said quietly. "She told me she wanted that old song she loved." Linda smiled thinly. "Funerals aren't about personal taste. They're about family." Something in my chest tightened. "I also wanted to speak," I added quietly. "She asked me to." Linda's smile disappeared. "Sweetheart, you're not in a state to do that." "I can do it," I looked up at her. "No," she said firmly. "It would be too emotional. We don't need a scene." A scene? My mother was gone and my grief was being managed like bad behavior. Over the next few days, Linda took over everything. She met with the pastor, she chose the flowers, she approved the obituary. I wasn't asked once. I was informed. When I tried to correct something, Linda would sigh and say, "We've already decided." When I pushed back, she'd soften her voice. "I know you think you know what your mother wanted, but I've known her longer." Longer, as if years automatically meant closeness. As if bedtime talks and shared secrets and holding her hand through chemo meant nothing compared to shared childhood memories. On the third night, I couldn't sleep at all. I wandered into my mother's room without meaning to. Her closet still smelled like her, lavender and laundry soap. I sat on the floor and cried until my chest hurt. That's when I saw the envelope. It was tucked into the bottom drawer of her nightstand, cream-colored. My name written on the front in her handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a copy of her will, not the official version, a copy she had made just for me, and a note. "My sweet girl, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am so sorry you are hurting. I need you to know something important. I chose you to handle my arrangements. I trust you. I know you will honor me. Linda will try to take control. Do not let her. Everything you need is here." I read it again and again. My mother had known. She had known exactly how this would go. I flipped through the pages. Executor of estate, me. Funeral arrangements authority, me. Final wishes clearly outlined. Cremation, small service, my speech, her favorite music. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. For the first time since she died, something solid formed inside me. Not anger, resolve. The next morning, Linda arrived with her usual confidence, carrying a folder thick with papers. "I booked the church," she announced. "Next Friday." I stood up. "No," I said. She paused, surprised. "Excuse me?" "That's not what my mother wanted," I said, "and it's not what's going to happen." Her eyes narrowed. "We talked about this." "Yes," I said calmly, "and now I'm telling you no." She laughed, short and sharp. "You're grieving. You're confused." I took a breath. "I've seen the will." The room went very still. Linda's face changed in a way I had never seen before. "What?" she said quickly. "I've seen the will," I repeated, "and the note she left me." Her mouth opened, then closed. "That's not possible," she said quickly. "I have the will." "You have a version," I replied. "I have a copy that names me executor and gives me full authority over her funeral." Her voice rose. "She wouldn't do that without telling me." "She did," I said softly. "She told me." Linda stared at me like I had suddenly become someone else. "You're mistaken," she said. "You're emotional." I reached into my pocket and placed the copy on the table. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She read the first page, then the second. Her face drained of color. "This doesn't mean anything," she said weakly. "I'm her sister." "And I'm her daughter," I replied, "and she trusted me." Linda straightened, anger flashing through her shock. "You're trying to control everything." "No," I said. "You already did that. I'm taking it back." She slammed the papers down. "You have no idea what you're doing." I met her gaze. "I know exactly what I'm doing." She grabbed her purse. "This isn't over." I watched her leave, my heart racing. I knew then that the funeral was only the beginning, because my aunt hadn't just taken over planning, she had assumed ownership of decisions, of money, of my mother's legacy, and she had no idea how much the will revealed, or how far I was willing to go to honor the woman who trusted me. This wasn't just about a funeral anymore. It was about the truth, and it was about to come out. Linda didn't call for 2 days after she stormed out of my house. Those were the quietest days since my mother died, and somehow the loudest. Every hour without confrontation gave me space to think, to read the will again, to trace my mother's handwriting with my finger like it might ground me. She hadn't just trusted me emotionally, she had prepared me legally. She knew Linda. She knew exactly how this would unfold. The will wasn't complicated, but it was deliberate. My mother had left everything to me. The house, her savings, her personal items, even her jewelry, which Linda had already started cataloging verbally, as if she were entitled to it. There was a small clause that made my stomach twist when I read it the first time. In the event that any party contests this will or attempts to interfere with my stated wishes, their inheritance shall be forfeited entirely. Linda was mentioned, specifically. I sat at the dining table with the papers spread out, feeling like my mother was sitting across from me, watching closely, trusting me to do what she no longer could. That trust felt heavy, but it also felt like strength. On the third morning, Linda showed up unannounced. This time, she didn't bring coffee or brochures. She brought a man in a gray suit. "This is our lawyer," she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. I stood my ground. "You should have called." She smiled thinly. "We didn't think you'd mind." The lawyer nodded politely. "I'm here to clarify a few misunderstandings." I gestured to the table. "Please, Sit." Linda looked surprised. She had expected me to panic, to crumble, to apologize. Instead, I had organized everything: the will copy, the note, the hospital paperwork, the emails my mother and I had exchanged discussing her wishes. Linda sat stiffly, arms crossed. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Thompson believed she was the executor of her sister's estate. "She's mistaken," I said calmly. Linda snapped. She was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly. I slid the medical records forward. These documents were signed months before she declined. The lawyer read silently. The longer he read, the more Linda shifted in her seat. "This is valid," he said finally. Linda's face hardened. "You can't be serious." "The will is clear," he replied, "and legally sound." "This is absurd," hissed Linda. "I was helping." "You were overruling," I said quietly. The lawyer closed the folder. "Miss Thompson has full authority, funeral arrangements included." Linda stood abruptly. "You're just going to let her erase me?" "No one is erasing you, but the law is the law." Linda's eyes burned into me. "You're doing this on purpose." I met her gaze. "I'm doing exactly what my mother asked me to do." She laughed bitterly. "You always were her favorite." That one landed. "She loved you, but she trusted me." Linda grabbed her purse. "This isn't finished." The lawyer hesitated. "Linda." She was already out the door. After they left, I sat down hard, my legs shaking. Standing up to her had taken everything I had, but it worked. The next step was the funeral home. I canceled the church booking. I scheduled the cremation. I chose the music. Every choice felt like reclaiming something Linda had tried to steal. Not money, not control, but meaning. When family members started calling, confused by the changes, I told them the truth. "Mom's wishes," I said simply. Some accepted it, some questioned it. A few told me Linda was heartbroken and just trying to help. I stopped defending myself. Grief had taught me something important. You don't owe explanations to people committed to misunderstanding you. 2 nights before the service, I found Linda in my mother's house. She had let herself in. She was standing in the bedroom holding my mother's pearl necklace, the one my mother wore every holiday. "What are you doing?" I asked sharply. Linda jumped, then recovered quickly. "I was just making sure her things were safe." I stepped forward. "Put that down." She clutched it tighter. "She promised this to me." "No," I said. "She didn't. She told me years ago." "She put everything in writing," I interrupted, "including this." I held up the page. Linda's eyes flicked to it, then away. "You're being cruel," she said, her voice trembling now. "I lost my sister too." "I know," I said, "but you don't get to take her from me to feel better." She sank onto the bed, suddenly smaller. "I didn't think she'd shut me out like this." I softened slightly. "She didn't shut you out. She set boundaries." Linda laughed weakly. "She never did that with anyone else." "She did with me," I said. "You just never saw it." She placed the necklace down slowly. When she left that night, she didn't slam the door. The funeral was exactly what my mother wanted. Small, quiet, personal. I spoke. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. I told stories only she and I shared, the kind that made people laugh through tears, the kind that made her feel real, not ceremonial. The song played. I felt her everywhere. Linda sat in the back. She didn't approach me afterward, but as people left, I saw her watching me, not with anger this time, but something closer to regret. I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong, because funerals don't end conflicts. They reveal them. And the will? The will was about to open doors Linda had been quietly planning to walk through alone, doors she had no right to touch. And now, she knew I had the keys. The week after the funeral felt heavier than the days before it. Grief, I learned, doesn't move in a straight line. It waits until the structure holding you together relaxes. Then it settles in deeper. The service was over, the flowers wilted, the casseroles stopped coming, and what remained was everything no one wanted to talk about. The house, the accounts, the quiet. Linda wasted no time. 3 days after the funeral, I received an email from her. Not a message, not a call. An email. Formal, cold. We need to discuss your mother's assets. I have already identified several items that were meant to remain in the family. Remain in the family? As if I wasn't family. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Everything my mother owned is already in the family. She made her intentions clear. Her response came within minutes. You're being emotional. This isn't personal, it's about fairness. Fairness?
That word again. Always used when someone wants something they weren't given. I forwarded the email to the estate attorney I'd hired the day after the funeral, a woman named Claire, calm and sharp, who didn't flinch when I explained Linda. She's testing boundaries, Claire said. This is common. She's already crossed them, I replied. Claire smiled slightly. Good, that makes things simpler. We scheduled a formal reading of the will, even though I already knew its contents. Claire insisted. Transparency protects you, she said. It removes the illusion that there's something hidden to argue over. Linda arrived early again. She brought a notebook, a pen, a confidence that felt forced. 2 other relatives showed up as well, an uncle who rarely called my mother, and a cousin who suddenly found time in her schedule. They sat close to Linda, whispering. I sat alone. Claire began reading. Every word landed like a measured step forward. Executor, me. Beneficiary, me. Property, me. Personal items, me. Linda's pen stopped moving. When Claire reached the clause about contesting the will, Linda stiffened. Objection, Linda said sharply. Claire didn't even look up. On what grounds? This is undue influence. My sister was manipulated. I felt my chest tighten. Claire finally looked at her. Do you have evidence? Linda gestured toward me. Look at her. She isolated my sister. I laughed once, incredulous. I lived with her. You controlled her, Linda snapped. You made her dependent. Claire raised a hand. Ms. Thompson, accusations require proof. She was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly. Claire slid a document across the table. Her physician's statement says otherwise. Linda's face flushed. This is ridiculous. Then you won't mind signing this, Claire said calmly, placing another paper in front of her. Linda glanced at it. What is that? A formal acknowledgement that you accept the will as written and waive your right to contest. Linda pushed it away. I'm not signing anything. Claire nodded. That's your choice. But be aware, if you contest and lose, the forfeiture clause applies. The room went silent. My uncle shifted uncomfortably. My cousin looked at Linda with something like alarm. You'd really do that? Linda asked me. I met her eyes. I'm not doing anything. You are. She stood abruptly. This is unbelievable. No, I said quietly. This is documented. Linda left without another word. The others followed shortly after, suddenly remembering appointments they had elsewhere. When the door closed, I exhaled deeply. You did well, but this isn't over. I nodded. I knew. Over the next 2 weeks, small things started disappearing from the house. A vase, a framed photo, a box of letters. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Grief messes with memory. But then I checked the security camera I'd installed after the funeral. Linda, letting herself in with a key she shouldn't have had, going through drawers, taking things. My hands shook as I watched the footage. I felt violated. not just because of the theft, but because she was touching pieces of my mother she had no right to. I sent the footage to Claire. Her response was immediate. "We're addressing this now." A cease and desist letter went out that same day. Locks were changed, an inventory was created, and a formal demand for the return of removed items was filed. Linda responded with fury. Voicemails, texts, emails accusing me of greed, betrayal, cruelty. She told relatives I was hoarding my mother's things, that I was punishing her, that I was heartless. I stopped listening, because here was the truth no one wanted to say out loud. This wasn't about missing my mother. This was about losing control. The final blow came when Linda filed a petition to contest the will. Claire called me as soon as it happened. "She's alleging undue influence and lack of capacity," she said. "Weak claims, but we'll need to respond." I closed my eyes. How long will this take? Months, possibly longer. I felt tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. "I don't want to fight," I said. Claire's voice softened. "You're not fighting, you're defending." The deposition was brutal. Linda painted herself as the devoted sister, sidelined by a manipulative daughter. She cried at strategic moments, paused for effect, spoke about sacrifices she never made. When it was my turn, I told the truth. I talked about doctor visits, medication schedules, late-night conversations, the will note, the warnings my mother had given me. When Linda's lawyer asked why my mother hadn't trusted her sister, I answered honestly. Because my mother knew Linda didn't listen when she said no. The room went quiet. The judge reviewed everything carefully, and when the ruling came down, it was decisive. The will stood. The contest was denied. The forfeiture clause was triggered. Linda lost everything she might have inherited. She also faced charges for unlawful entry and theft. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I went home and sat in my mother's chair and cried, not because I felt guilty, but because something had finally ended, a dynamic, a fear, a pattern of being overridden. The next time I saw Linda was outside the courthouse. She looked smaller, older, stripped of certainty. "You didn't have to destroy me," she said. I looked at her for a long moment. "I didn't destroy you," I said. "I stopped letting you destroy what wasn't yours." She scoffed weakly. She would hate this. I shook my head. She planned for it. And for the first time, I knew I was right. But the story wasn't finished yet, because the will held one final surprise, one my aunt never expected, and one that would change everything she thought she knew about my mother and herself. That truth was waiting, and it was coming next. The call from Claire came late in the afternoon, when the light in the house was starting to soften and stretch across the floors, the way it always had when my mother was alive. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through a box of papers I hadn't had the courage to touch yet. Old warranties, recipe cards, birthday notes written in my mother's looping handwriting. Ordinary things. Sacred things. "Are you sitting down?" Claire asked. I smiled faintly. "I'm always sitting down when you call." "This is different," she said. "We found something." My chest tightened. "What kind of something?" "There's a codicil attached to the will. It wasn't included in the copy you found in the nightstand. It was filed separately." I closed my eyes. My mother had always been thorough, quietly strategic. She never did anything halfway. "What does it say?" I asked. Claire hesitated just long enough for my pulse to spike. "It outlines a trust," she said, "one that activates only if the will is contested." I sat up straighter. "A trust for who?" "For you. And restrictions for your aunt." The room felt suddenly too small. Claire continued, "Your mother anticipated interference. She created a conditional trust that transfers additional assets to you if anyone attempts to override her wishes. It includes investment accounts Linda didn't know about, and one more thing." My fingers curled around the edge of the table. "What?" "A letter," Claire said, "addressed to the court, and to Linda. My breath caught. "When can I see it?" I asked. "Tomorrow," Claire said, "but I should warn you, it's very explicit." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my mother, sitting somewhere quietly, planning all this. Not out of anger, out of protection. She had known Linda would push. She had known I would hesitate. She had known the pressure would come, and she had built guardrails around me long before I ever realized I would need them. The next morning, I sat in Claire's office as she slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "This is a copy," she said. "The original has already been submitted." My hands trembled as I opened it.
The letter was dated 6 months before my mother died. It began simply, "To whom it may concern. If you are reading this, then someone I love has chosen to not respect my wishes. I want the record to be clear." My throat tightened. "I am of sound mind. I am not being influenced, coerced, or confused. The decisions in my will are intentional." Claire watched quietly as I read. "My sister Linda has a history of speaking for me instead of listening to me. She believes closeness entitles her to control. It does not." I sucked in a breath. "I love my sister, but I do not trust her to honor my boundaries. That is why I have placed responsibility in my daughter's hands. She listens. She respects me. She sees me." Tears blurred the page. If Linda is contesting this will, then she has proven my concerns correct. I covered my mouth, trying to steady myself. "I ask the court to uphold my wishes, not as an act of punishment, but as an act of respect." The letter ended there. No bitterness, no insults, just truth. Claire cleared her throat softly. "There's more." She slid another document forward. The trust. Accounts my mother had quietly built over years. Modest, but meaningful. Designed to support me long-term. Activated only by conflict. "She planned this as a shield," Claire said, "not a weapon." I nodded slowly. "And Linda?" I asked. Claire's expression turned serious. "The letter is being read into the record at the next hearing." My stomach flipped. "She'll hear it?" "Yes." The hearing was brief. Linda sat stiffly at her table, arms crossed, jaw set. She still looked defiant, until the judge asked for the letter to be read. The clerk's voice was calm, neutral, but every word landed like a bell tolling. I watched Linda's face change. Confusion, then anger, then something closer to fear. When the line about control was read, Linda's head snapped up. "That's not true," she muttered. But the room stayed silent, because my mother wasn't there to be interrupted anymore. When the reading ended, Linda looked shaken. The judge folded his hands. "It's clear the deceased anticipated this situation. The trust is valid. The will stands." Linda stood abruptly. "You turned him against me," she snapped, pointing at me. I didn't respond. The judge's voice sharpened. "Ms. Thompson, you've already lost standing. Sit down." Linda dropped back into her chair, stunned. Outside the courtroom, she confronted me. "She poisoned you against me," Linda hissed. "She rewrote history." I looked at her, really looked at her. "No," I said quietly. "She finally wrote it down." Linda's eyes shone, furious and wet. "You think you won." I shook my head. This was never a competition. She laughed bitterly. "Then why does it feel like I lost everything?" "Because you tried to take what wasn't yours," I thought. But I didn't say it. I didn't need to. The consequences were already speaking. In the weeks that followed, the dust settled. The trust was transferred. The house was secured. The stolen items were returned. Linda stopped calling. Relatives stopped asking. The noise faded.
and what remained was something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not happiness, not closure. Peace. I spent long afternoons going through my mother's things properly this time, slowly, with intention. I found journals where she wrote about me, about worries she never voiced, about pride she rarely said out loud. I learned things about her I'd never known, and I understood, finally, why she had planned so carefully. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of what would happen to me afterward. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the house filled with amber light, I sat on the floor surrounded by open boxes and felt something inside me shift. My aunt had tried to take over the funeral. She hadn't known I'd seen the will. She hadn't known my mother had seen her coming, and she hadn't known that in trying to seize control, she would lose it entirely. But the story wasn't about Linda. Not really. It was about a mother who knew her child, and a daughter who finally learned to trust herself. There was only one part left now: letting go. Not of my mother, but of the version of myself who believed she had to stay quiet to keep the peace. That ending was waiting, and I was finally ready for it. The house felt different once everything was over. Not emptier, quieter in a way that felt earned. For weeks after the last hearing, I kept expecting another letter, another accusation, another attempt to reclaim control. My body stayed braced out of habit, like it had learned that peace was temporary and tension was the default. But nothing came. No emails, no calls, no intermediaries just checking in. Linda disappeared from my life as abruptly as she had tried to take it over. At first, that absence felt strange. Then it felt like relief, and eventually it felt like space, wide open space I hadn't realized I'd been denied my entire life. I started going through my mother's things again, this time without urgency or fear. I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I wasn't preparing for battle. I was simply remembering.
There were photo albums filled with pictures I didn't recognize. My mother young, laughing, unguarded. Trips she'd taken before I was born, friends whose names I never learned, versions of her that existed outside of sacrifice. I realized something quietly devastating and quietly beautiful at the same time. My mother had been more than just my mother, and she had wanted me to be more than just someone who survived other people. One afternoon, while sorting through a box labeled Important, I found a notebook I hadn't seen before. No title, just a plain cover. Inside were pages of thoughts she'd written over years. Some were about me, some were about Linda, some were about herself. She wrote about feeling overridden, about being spoken for, about how often peace came at the cost of self-erasure. And then, toward the end, her writing changed. Stronger, clearer, resolved. I am allowed to choose, one entry read, even if it disappoints someone. I closed the notebook and pressed it to my chest. My mother hadn't just left me assets or instructions. She had left me permission. Permission to be firm. Permission to say no. Permission to stop confusing love with compliance. The final legal documents arrived in the mail a few weeks later. Everything complete. Everything finalized. I signed where needed, filed where required, and then I did something that surprised even me. I invited Linda to pick up the last of the items that legally belonged to her. Photographs, childhood mementos, a few personal things my mother had explicitly set aside. Not because I owed her, because I no longer needed distance to feel safe. She arrived quietly, older somehow, the sharpness dulled by consequence. She didn't look around like she owned the place anymore. She stood near the doorway, uncertain. "I won't stay long," she said. "That's fine," I replied. She collected the items slowly, carefully. Her hands lingered on a photograph of her and my mother as children. "She was stubborn," Linda said softly. I nodded. Yes, she was. Linda swallowed. "She always chose you." I met her gaze. She chose herself, too. That's what you couldn't accept. Linda didn't argue. Before she left, she hesitated. I didn't think you had it in you. I almost laughed. I didn't either, I said honestly, until I had to. She nodded once and walked out. That was the last time I saw her. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. Grief doesn't work like that. Healing doesn't arrive wrapped in certainty, but something fundamental had changed. I no longer questioned my instincts. I no longer waited for permission. I no longer confused silence with strength. When I made decisions now, they came from a grounded place, from trust, from clarity. I redecorated the house slowly, intentionally. I kept the pieces that felt like my mother, let go of the ones that felt like obligation. I hosted small dinners, laughed more easily, let people see me without armor. And sometimes, late at night, I talked to my mother out loud, not asking for guidance, just cheering. One evening, while sitting on the porch as the sun dipped low, I realized something that made me smile through tears. My aunt had taken over planning the funeral. She hadn't known I'd seen the will, but more than that, she hadn't known my mother had already let go of control in the healthiest way possible, by trusting me, and in doing so, she gave me the one inheritance that mattered most: my voice, my spine, my life. This wasn't a story about revenge. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about money or property or legal documents. It was about a woman who knew exactly who would try to erase her wishes, and a daughter who finally learned she didn't have to disappear to keep the peace. My aunt planned the funeral, but my mother planned the ending, and I was strong enough to carry it out.